Welcome in, Campo and Joe. We're counting down the days. The draft is next week, and we're looking forward to talking a little Jaguar football with you. Joe C. from XL Primetime, Coach Dave Campo. He's our head coach right here on 1010XL, 92.5 FM. And, Coach, I'm telling you, as we get the fans kind of a little more fired up this week and next week, I mean, the energy is really starting to build as far as what this draft's going to bring.
Well, you have a great season like we did, a great finish to the season.
Yep.
The expectations and the excitement are still here in the city. People here in Jacksonville got to be fired up because, one or two really good picks could make the difference in finishing where they did this year and finishing a little farther along the line there. So this is a great week. I'm getting a little tired talking about the draft. I want to see it now.
Yeah. You want to see some results. You want to see some names, and I know Jaguar fans want to as well. But as I pointed out to Frank Frangie after XL Primetime was wrapping up today, like we have had the luxury of a postseason that we haven't had in half a decade, and a postseason that went on for a couple of weeks, and then the joy and the euphoria that came out of that. And then you went into free agency, and even though it was kind of light, they didn't really have a whole lot of money to go out there and sign guys. We really haven't drilled down on the draft. I remember even trying to tell you, Coach, hey, Coach, I know you're fired up for the draft. We got to talk free agency first. Now we finally get to talk about the draft.
Absolutely. And, the other thing is, since I've joined, doing stuff with you guys, a couple of those years, we were talking the draft in the middle of November.
Yeah.
So, this is great because it's shorter off season.
Yeah.
When you're winning, it just goes faster.
Yeah. Because if you think about it, Jaguars postseason, then basically the championship game, the Super Bowl, combine, free agency, and then boom, here we are.
Like that is quick.
Now, the things that we got to get into today, like before we get to the quarterback talk, let's just bring up Chad Muma, who we had on XL Primetime earlier today. If anybody wants to check it out, you can go to 1010XL.com, click on the on-demand, and listen to it. And I think more than anything else, it was cool that Chad Muma, he may not have been the best player. He may not have even been a signature player last year. But you know what he did signal, Coach? He was part of that change between Trevor Lawrence developing into a star quarterback, all these pieces coming together, fighting through an 0 for October. And he talked about the growth that he went through and this team, what they went through.
Well, first of all, I listened to the show, and the comment that you guys made afterwards was listening to him. If everybody has that mentality that he has, you made the comment that he might be developing into a leader. Well, there could be a lot of leaders in that locker room, and that's where the culture changes occurred. I think, they brought in smart, solid, good character people that played to their ability level. And that's how they got where they did in the second half of the season, because they could have folded early, which other teams have done here with the Jaguars.
And you're talking about guys that not just show up and be accountable, they put in work and they get results. And it's key that Muma, Devin Lloyd, Trayvon Walker, we can go down the line with guys that had limited experience last year that were hurled into some important roles this year. And I made the point to Chad, this year, the players and Mike Caldwell as a second-year coordinator, they all can turn a big corner.
Absolutely. And, again, that's the excitement part of it, is that not only are we going to help ourselves, hopefully, in the draft, but we've already helped ourselves in free agency. You can say whatever you want with Ridley.
Yeah.
I watched one of Ridley's workouts, and he's the real deal.
Yeah.
And now you've got young guys in this program that have ability that are going to get better. And with the coaching staff they have, I think they've got a really good coaching staff. I really enjoyed watching them in last year in training camp. Looking forward to these OTAs when we can get out there. But they do a good job of coaching, and that's going to be a plus for sure. You're going to see improvement with them alone, not the guys that we bring in.
It really is true, because they only lost a couple of guys. And so keeping that core together, and then all of them feeling and tasting the success last year and trying to add to it this year is only going to be a plus. So tell folks, as a head coach, as a guy who's been in these draft war rooms, you're 8-9 days out. what are you really starting to drill down on now, solidifying the plan for the draft?
Well, this week they're finishing up any studies that they've been doing.
Mm-hmm.
And, they get together and they go through every player. They're finalizing the board. Okay. A lot of people think, well, they already know what they're going to do. No, they have the board, and it isn't finalized until the decision makers make that official.
Right.
So this week, that's what's happening. Next week, it's going to be more the assistant coaches, the coordinators, and all those people are out of it. It's the decision makers, the head coach, the owner, the personnel people are in there, and they may be massaging the board a little bit based on need, whatever, but they're putting them into the categories that are going to make their picks. And they might have a mock draft. I don't know if they still do that. We did it, back in the day where each guy had a team in the organization, including all the scouts, and we had the needs of those teams, and we drafted the first 2 or 3 rounds 3 or 4 times to just somebody would step up and say, okay, I want to make a trade with whatever, just so that you have to, in your mind, here's somebody we really wanted, but now somebody jumps us. What do we do now?
Yeah.
Those kind of things they may still rehearse a little bit. We did it. I don't know if they still do that or not.
Well, I described it to you earlier. It's a good problem to have, and by that I mean the problem of figuring out who's going to be available at 24 and how many different choices you have. It beats the heck out of being at the top of the draft and having a few players to select from. I don't mind sorting through, all right, is that tight end going to fall to us? Is that lineman going to fall to us? Is that cornerback going to fall? I'll take that all day long.
Yeah, and that's, that's good. The only problem is, the only thing I disagree with you about, if you're doing your homework, those first 10 picks, they're legitimate guys. Now, that doesn't always happen. You don't always make the right decision. But, those guys are legitimate guys. Once you get down into the back end of the draft, they're good players. Don't get me wrong. They're really good players. But there's a little bit more of a, little indecision with some of the strengths and weaknesses, I guess.
I'll give you an example. And we've been doing our Duval Dirty Dozen. I'm just going to throw this at you, Coach, and we're going to get back to some of our draft picks. But I'm going to throw the Duval Dirty Dozen at you. And basically, we have come up with the good, the bad, the ugly of the Jaguars draft history. Now, I always tie it back to 2008. That was when Derek Harvey was selected. That's when this Jaguar team moved up, gave away draft capital to move up to get Derek Harvey. We all know that was an absolute bust. Right. You were here coaching when that guy was selected, so you know exactly what I'm talking about.
I wasn't here in 8.
You were here 5, 6, and 7. You left in 8.
Yeah.
And so, but you know exactly what I'm talking about, just in terms of the time period. They had just come off of a playoff run, which you were a part of, and then you go up to Cleveland.
Oh, Dallas.
Dallas.
Back to Dallas.
Come from Cleveland here and then go back to Dallas.
Right.
And so you know exactly what I'm talking about. But, Coach, from 2008 to 2017, which is a decade of top 10 picks,
right?
How many of those guys will ever be thought about as a member of the Jaguar Pride, any of these types of things that we would look to if you're talking about a top 10 pick, say, in the years before? Freddie T., Tony Baselli, the Trevor Lawrence, in this era.
Yes.
I mean, isn't it crazy?
Yes. I think we mentioned this on the primetime show last week, I believe. First-round quarterbacks, half of them were good players. Yeah. I'm talking about of the 60 that have been picked over since 2000. Half of them were good, half of them were not good.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a crapshoot, that's for sure. It's not a guarantee. That's the problem.
And so if you've been picking in the top 10 that long, I don't mind. And we would always have this argument, Hacker and I, back in the day. And he's like, you can get the best player. I don't care. I want to be the best team.
Well,
I want to be being talked about in October and November as opposed to April.
Yeah, and that point of it, I agree with you 100%. I'd rather be picking 24th than first. because that means that we win a ways into the playoffs and all those kind of things.
Yeah.
So I agree with that part.
If you're one of the last 8, that means you made it to the divisional round.
Absolutely.
That is as important as anything. Okay, so let's at least look at some of the focus that you have right now. And I wouldn't mind if you tell everybody that the way you view the draft, depending on how deep any particular year is, you're looking at maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 elite players. And then after that, they may all kind of land in one big pile.
Absolutely. And you know, I heard the Buffalo GM this week made a comment. He said he's only got a few first round grades. Well, I don't believe that. But I will say that normally when that board is put up, there's usually about 17 or 18 guys that you have listed as the guys, in your opinion, are first round guys. The strengths way outweigh the weaknesses, and you know, they're the guys that are going to go. Well, once it goes past that, from there to about halfway through the second round, in my opinion, they're all the same guy. And what I mean by that is the grades are not going to be that much different between those guys. They're all going to have strengths. They're all going to have weaknesses. And they're all going to be different positions. But you can bunch guys together. So if you have, for example, a 24th pick, there are probably 5 or 6 guys that you have grades that are basically the same. Could be 5 different positions.
Right.
Well, those 5 guys, you've got to prioritize those, because you don't know, number one, if they're going to be there.
Right.
And number 2, you don't know if somebody's going to jump over and take one of the guys you like. So when that happens, you got to be ready to make that pick in 10 minutes or 15 minutes, I think, for first round now. So, you know, you categorize the guys based on that. And hopefully, if you have a need, that in that bunch, hopefully you have 2 or 3 guys that are in that bunch that have your need.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes down to the actual pick, though, I believe that if there's one of those guys in that first 18 that's still sitting there, you got to take that guy.
Right.
Because he, in your opinion, has everything that it takes. The strengths way outweigh the weaknesses. Right. And you take the best player on the board. Yeah. And you know, sometimes that's a guy you might need.
Well, it can happen, and let's just use Pittsburgh as an example. Regarded as a very good drafting team. They've done it for a long, long time. Through a few coaches, a lot of success, and maybe just a handful of personnel guys that have been making these decisions. But they would go back to the same position, it seemed like, year after year after year, and you're like, wait a minute. They just went defensive tackle last year. Why are they going defense? Because they knew that was the best player available.
And that's kind of what they did with Lloyd and Muma this year. That's why I think they've got the right approach. They took the best available with Muma. I mean, they didn't need to take Muma, but they took the best available at that position. And I think that's the way you have to go. And part of that, it should get better. For example, one of the great things about Pittsburgh is they've had very few coaches. Yeah. So, you know, they have they know what they want their team to look like. Right. They know, you know, the type of guys they want. Yeah. And that's what it appears to me that Doug Peterson has.
Yeah. The personality and the playbook from one guy if it's consistent, it can pay off.
Absolutely. Because, you know, those are the kind of guys you get. Yeah. I've said before that the one thing about Jimmy Johnson that I have utmost respect for, he always took smart guys because he felt that those guys will learn. And if you're teaching them, they're going to get better. And that's, you know, kind of the character and smart guys that, you know, that's kind of the kind of guys you're looking for.
Yeah. And you're hoping that the Mumas, the Devin Lloyds, Trayvon Walkers, because those were very important first night picks into the second night with Muma, then Luke Fortner also on Friday night. I mean, those are really important picks that you better get right. All right, so with the theory that Coach laid out, let's just say it's 12.5. After that, you got a big pile to choose from. As we sit here, 8-9 days out, the most important and pressing needs and match it up with the most attractive targets that are out there in the first round. It's not easy to do this.
No.
And we're just guessing.
And I kind of read to you guys, the guys that I would like.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of them, but there's nothing
but that's
wrong with
not the issue is, what position if one of those guys you really like is at that position, who do you take at 24? And my feeling is, first of all, we need to get better on defense.
Mm-hmm.
There's no question about that in my mind. But it's very difficult to get the big lineman unless you're in the right position. If a lineman is there, I'm talking about offensive line, tackle. If there's a tackle there at number 24 that you have graded very high, you're hopeful that one of those guys falls to that position. And the guy that I'm looking at is Harrison. I think he's going to be there. Harrison, the offensive tackle from I've just lost my from Oklahoma. There are you got Paris Johnson, you got Skoronski from Northwestern, you got Jones from Georgia, Broad Jones.
Right.
You got and my next guy is Harrison, and Harrison may be the guy that's there.
Now, Mel Kiper and Todd McShay threw out a recent mock. This came out a little earlier today, and they basically went through the first 3 rounds, and they went pick for pick. They just kept swapping it out.
Right.
Bryce Young has now moved to the top of the draft. We'll throw a little thought at you about him coming up here in just a second. But just to kind of give you where they were today, this is always changing. But let's just go from 21 on. Jordan Addison, wide receiver out of Southern Cal. And this kind of speaks to what Coach is saying, that there's a big pile, and I'm just going to give him a grade of 6.71. Is that okay?
Yeah.
6.71. They're all right there.
Right.
And there's very little separating them. So Jordan Addison comes off the board. He goes to the Chargers. The Ravens take Emmanuel Forbes, which is one of the guys that Coach likes, out of Mississippi State. Next guy, Joey Porter Jr., another cornerback from Penn State. So you're like, holy smokes, they're coming off the board. This is McShay picking Michael Mayer, tight end out of Notre Dame. Now, I'm not even saying that we're on opposite sides of this argument, but I know that's a need. And if he is the highest graded player, even though you still may need a lineman and a cornerback, don't you got to be thinking about that a little bit?
If his grade is the same as a bunch of other people, then you take the need.
Okay.
But if his grade is higher than a bunch of those people that you have there, then you have to take the tight end. And the great thing about that is a need for us, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But it's not, to me, the O-line, pass rusher, cornerback outweighs that pick unless he's at number 15 on your board and you're at 24.
Yeah, and that's really the way to look at it. If Michael Mayer, as you view it, and this may not be right, but as you view it, if he's the 15th best player on your board and you're picking 9 spots after that, and you've got a big pile of all these other guys that you kind of have rated a little bit lower than him, and by the way, the tight end room is a one-man room. That's what I'm calling it. It's a one-man room, man on an island, Evan Ingram, and you haven't even signed him yet.
Right.
And so it's an empty room right now. Right. So you need to think about that. Now, let me give you this other half of this and tell me whether you'd go, wait a minute, I'm not doing that. Deontay Banks is still sitting there. Okay, the cornerback out of Maryland is still sitting there. Quentin Johnson, wide receiver, maybe not the most pressing need, but just Deontay Banks versus Michael Mayer.
Oh, I'm taking Banks.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm taking Banks if Mayer is in that pile.
Okay.
I'm taking the best, the guy that helps us the most this year.
Okay.
I'm taking if the grades are close. If I've got a cluster of 5 or 6 guys that the grades are close for that position, and one of the guys that I've graded that from a need standpoint, I'm taking need then.
Right.
The only time I'm going best on the board is if all the other, everybody's gone, and I still got a guy sitting up there, and I get down to 24 and he's still sitting there.
Yeah.
I'm taking him.
Right.
Because I'm going with my board. Obviously, other people have not seen the same thing in the guy.
Right.
But I'm taking the guy that I've graded, our people have graded in that position on the board.
Now, the next round, McShay picks Riley Moss, the cornerback out of Iowa. Now, we can all sit here and agree that they need to create more pass rush, need to cover better. They may need to have an answer at the nickel position and how to defend a tight end named Travis Kelce. And they could certainly use a tight end to do what Doug wants to do, which is 2 tight end system.
Right.
So they're all there. You like Riley Moss with that second-round pick?
I would think that there would be another corner there better than Riley Moss, to be honest with you. And I think it's a deep corner draft.
Yeah.
What I would consider doing there is, and again, this is all speculation because we don't know where anybody's graded, on the deal. But I would consider there's going to be a bunch of corners that are going to go 31, 32. Well, let's go second round, 32, 33, 34, 40, and before they get to us.
Jacksonville doesn't pick till 56.
Right. So to me, those corners probably go down into close to where we are.
Okay.
If I had to move a little bit to get them, I would move a little bit to get one if they're there.
So, and I'm just throwing thoughts at you to get your reaction. Right now, this team, you're the head coach, and you're not necessarily calling all the shots. You got Balky back there going, I'll leave that up to coach. But would you be more inclined to make a move and give up draft capital in the second round, which is not as expensive, versus making a move in the first round?
Correct.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And not hit the panic button.
Absolutely. Unless there was somebody up there that you're absolutely convinced he's going to go before you do.
Right. Right.
And not only that, you have to be able to move.
Mm-hmm.
You don't automatically, well, I want to go from 24 to 21.
Yeah.
Well, the guy at 21 has got to agree with you.
Exactly.
He wants to move.
Yeah.
I think we have, the good thing is having the 2 fourth-round picks.
Mm-hmm.
I think moving to the second round
at least it's a little draft
is
cap.
a little easier.
And that does make sense.
Yeah.
So I'm asking you that because I'm thinking that, and I'm thinking if there is going to be a move, that would make sense. A good target area to give up some draft capital in the 4th round and make a move in the 2nd round.
Right. And I agree with that. I think in the 1st round, you would prioritize guys and you would say, okay, that's one of the things you're doing in this last week of meetings, the decision makers.
Right.
One of the things you do is you do an exercise. You go, okay, we're at 24. What happens if Carter's there at 20?
Wow, that would be something.
What happens if this guy falls because of one reason or another? Because they know a lot more about these guys than we do.
Sure. Well, you know what? Hit some of your guys that you have that you feel like are very likely not going to be there, but could be there. And then you've got that tough decision to make.
Yeah.
You've got a handful of them.
Yeah. Well, I would say the edge is probably the
Miles
area.
Murphy of the world.
If Anderson from Alabama, if Wilson from Texas Tech, if Van Ness from Iowa, if Murphy, all those guys could go before us.
Very much so.
Nolan Smith could go before us. If we I love all of those guys.
Sure.
So if any of those guys were real close to us and I thought somebody else was going to get them, I would consider moving.
Okay.
I would not move. I don't think there's any other position that I would say that I'm going to jump up to get somebody.
Okay. But Lucas Van Ness, you kind of like.
Yeah, I like Van Ness.
Yeah. Okay.
And then there's another guy in there, McDonald, that I don't even have written here.
It's Will McDonald, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny because people are kind of up and down on this guy.
Right.
But long arms, they think potential.
Good athlete. Can run.
And so he might be one that if he falls to you, then you're going to have to make a tough decision.
Yeah, correct. He'd be in a pile, though.
Right.
He's not one of those guys that's up there where you say, you're going to make, is this guy dropping? Is this guy dropping? He's not dropping. He's going to be in that pile. He's going to be in that pile at 24, in my opinion.
Yeah. All right. So before we get out of here, let's hit the top of the draft real quick because Jacksonville's not picking at the top and Jacksonville doesn't have to worry about a quarterback. So,
thank goodness.
Yeah. We're in a good spot right now in Duval. But Bryce Young, the news came out yesterday that he canceled all of his other visits, pre-draft visits, none. He is now the betting favorite to be number 1 overall and go to Carolina. Now the news comes out before we started doing our podcast that Will Levis, according to Vegas, and Vegas is pretty good this way, that this Caesar Sportsbook has moved him up as the next betting favorite quarterback to go off the board. Do you think he goes number 2 to the Houston Texans? That would be something.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I hadn't looked at Levis as much as I did those other top guys because, I felt that there were some weaknesses there. Very inconsistent player, in my opinion. Got a big arm, can move. So, I mean, he's definitely a prospect, but I don't know how good a prospect he is.
Right.
But the one thing it does show me is if that, in fact, is the case, there's some concern about Stroud because in my mind, when I look at the two guys, there was no question in my mind that I would take Bryce Young at number 1.
Okay.
And I've said that every time we've talked about it. The thing about Stroud is that Ohio State quarterback thing could factor in, but I don't know. There's something they don't like about him.
Yeah, and
inconsistency is one of it.
Yeah,
he had one great game against Georgia. That's it.
And he moved well in that game. Was a good decision maker. But then, if you say to yourself, why did he have or you say to yourself, he had a great game against Georgia. The next thing you got to say to yourself is, why didn't he have a bunch of good games like that? And that could be the reason. He's not the most mobile guy.
Right.
He does have the size. He can move, but he doesn't do it all the time. And a fairly good passer, but they just may have knocks on him. And, to your point, and a lot of people have felt this way, the Buckeyes play a Big Ten schedule, and they out-recruit, by and large, everybody,
right?
Not named Michigan, and now more recently not named Penn State. But everybody else, they are head and shoulders a deeper roster and a more talented roster. And so maybe that is why the quarterback shines.
Well, and I think Levis, from what I've seen, can move.
Yeah.
For definitely. A big guy.
Yeah.
Anthony Richardson can definitely move.
Yep.
Bryce Young can move.
Oh, yeah.
So I think what they're doing with the quarterback position in this day and age is if they've got the other measurables and intangibles, the arm, the things you look at, the smarts, the arm, the character.
I call it the AAA: arm, attitude, and meaning, can you be a baller, and accuracy.
Yeah, if they've got those things, but they also have maneuverability because the defenses today can fly now. They can move. This is, you got guys up front coming after you. You've got to have a little bit of mobility. That's maybe why Levis moves up ahead of Stroud.
Yeah, we'll find out. That would be some kind of get if Will Levis moves up. The meteoric rise that we've seen from Anthony Richardson, we'll find out if it's real or not, coming up next Thursday night.
Absolutely.
All right, Coach, we are out. Campo and Joe, always appreciate you all tuning in, finding us wherever we are at. All of Duval getting fired up for that selection next Thursday
Absolutely.
night.
This will be a fun couple of weeks here.
Campo and Joe, have a great week.